Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney. I'm Attorney John Redmann. Thank you for joining us for another special episode of the show where we'll tackle more questions that you may have about COVID-19. Today we're focusing on three very important topics. First, we'll be discussing how to navigate unemployment benefits. Secondly, we're going to talk about landlord-tenant issues, and in particular, evictions. What are your rights? What should you do? Our third segment will be regarding financial options for those affected by COVID-19 and what has changed since our first COVID special about 2 weeks prior to today's filming. We have three wonderful guests for you today. Two of these guests are attorneys for Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. Ms. Amanda Golub will answer questions about landlord-tenant issues. Ms. Rowena Jones is here to tell us about unemployment benefits. Both of these attorneys are from SLLS, the go-to organization providing free legal help to people in this part of our state. Finally, we'll hear from CPA Tom South for his follow-up input on stimulus loans and related information. As always, you can get in touch with us by visiting us at johnredmondpoa.com for more information about everything we talk about on the show. We will get started after this short break. Welcome back. We're joined by attorney Rowena Jones of Southeast Louisiana Legal Services about unemployment benefits. Across the United States, more than 36 million Americans have filed for unemployment by now. That's a devastating number of people, and families are in real economic pain. So let's go over what is available to people who have lost their jobs because of this pandemic. Ms. Jones, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Hello. Good evening.
Okay, so let's talk about unemployment. But before we do that, I think it would be important to take a little step back. You work for Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. I'm very familiar with this organization. It's a nonprofit. It helps people who don't have money to pay for legal services for all kinds of different legal help. But if we could put we've got a PowerPoint, a slide we can put on the screen. It's a flow chart. That's not the one. Why don't you tell us about Southeast Louisiana Legal Services? Just a little more about what they do, what kind of legal services they provide for free to those who are eligible for because they don't have money.
Thank you, John. For more details, I'm going to ask people to check out our website at www.slls.org. There lists all of our major funders. We are a nonprofit law firm, and we provide free legal services to most of Southeast Louisiana, to those who meet our eligibility, those who are eligible for our free legal services. And we provide free legal services in a variety of legal problems. The major areas that we do not cover are criminal defense and most fee-generating type cases like, torts, personal injury, that type of thing.
All right, so let's be clear, you don't represent people who've been charged with criminal offenses, and you don't handle things like personal injury, but you do offer services for unemployment benefits, which is an area, a department that you are dedicated to. That's an area that you are focused on. There's also the area of bankruptcy. There's also, what other category? Just so people have an idea of what they might contact your office for.
Sure, just and a full list can be found on our website, but broad areas we cover, most major family issues like divorce. Mm-hmm. We represent children in need of care. We handle many consumer problems such as bankruptcy. We handle certain tax problems, okay. Unemployment and benefits problems, just a variety, okay. And housing okay. issues.
And on that note, we have from your office attorney Amanda Golub, who is going to talk to us about landlord-tenant issues and evictions, which is a very hot topic, and that's going to be the segment immediately following this one. So, and one more thing, from the website, people can learn how to contact you, and you have more than one physical location when you're actually able to receive people in your office, correct?
That's correct. People can apply online. You can find that information through our website. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can get all of our office locations, phone numbers, and so on there. We have offices in several cities and towns in the Southeast Louisiana area.
Great. Okay, well, let's get right to the topic that you're here to tell us more about, and that is unemployment benefits. A lot of people in this state are drastically impacted because they were furloughed, which is a kind of a nice way of saying you don't have a job and a paycheck anymore for many people, and who knows when that's going to end. So would you describe for us what does it mean to be unemployed, or how to get unemployment benefits, and what kind of benefits does that mean in this state, especially considering the government stimulus benefits that may apply?
Sure. I'll just give you, there's generally, outside of an emergency situation like we're in now with the pandemic, there's what I'm going to call regular state unemployment benefits. That's the program that's in existence all the time, and it's administered by the Louisiana Workforce Commission, as it's called presently. And their website is laworks.net. That's laworks.net. And that's where someone can start if they want to apply for unemployment benefits. Now, right now, in addition to the regular state unemployment benefits, there are special extended benefits and pandemic-related assistance.
Okay, so prior to the pandemic, if somebody was eligible for unemployment benefits, whether they made $300 a week before being unemployed or $3,000 a week before getting unemployed, the state of Louisiana unemployment benefits, was it a specific amount, or did it depend on how much you earned?
Well, once somebody with regular state unemployment benefits, a person has to first meet the first step is to look at whether someone's monetarily eligible. It's basically like an insurance program. That's a good comparison. You have to put money in order to draw it out when you become unemployed. So someone has to have put in enough money through their earnings history to qualify monetarily. Then at that point, how much money, if they're not disqualified because of the reason that they were separated from their job, then the amount of money they get is determined by state law. The maximum in Louisiana at this point is $247 a week.
All right, so I want to get to what makes you eligible to receive unemployment benefits and what makes you ineligible or not eligible for benefits. But I think I heard you say the maximum you can get in unemployment benefits, not including this government stimulus money, is $247 a week, correct?
That's correct, no matter how much you were earning in your prior job.
Okay, all right. The government stimulus package has added a sizable chunk on top of that if you're eligible, correct?
That's correct, and those benefits, if your job, if you're eligible for the, let me just say that the $600 per week, in addition, the federal unemployment assistance that's been added on, and many people call it a stimulus payment, it became effective the week ending April 4th. So if you were eligible and you filed your claim before that, you should be getting that $600 in addition to regular unemployment or a baseline pandemic emergency type payment, which I can explain in more detail if you want.
Sure, and unfortunately we have a limited amount of time on this, but we will be putting more information on the Power of Attorney website, and I'm sure people can get more information from your website as well. But what I'd like to do is try and cover the basics in our limited time. But it sounds like some people are going to get more money with the stimulus money and the unemployment benefits than they were earning before being unemployed, and that poses more problems. And I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. But let's talk about generally who generally is eligible for unemployment benefits and who is generally not eligible for unemployment benefits. If you could give us a summary of that.
Sure. Now, with regular unemployment benefits, like what somebody might be eligible for at this point depends upon a lot of different factors. So people shouldn't take this as advice that might apply to their particular situation. But in general, for regular state unemployment benefits, someone must be monetarily eligible. They put enough money into the system, basically, in order to draw it out. And then they have to have been separated from their from any job in the look-back period for reasons that were not disqualifying or not their fault, basically.
In other words, you lost your job not because you decided to just quit, take a vacation, a permanent vacation from work, but you got fired or you got laid off, and it's not because you intentionally quit or got yourself fired because you were, drinking on the job or something? That's correct.
You can even be fired, you could be qualified for regular unemployment even if you were fired for violating one of your employer's rules. It all depends on the facts.
Okay.
You could also potentially be eligible for quitting, but only if you quit because your employer substantially changed the conditions of your job. For example, reduced your pay significantly.
Okay. And that's one of the reasons why if it's not clear cut that you got fired for no good reason whatsoever, it would be a good reason to go consult with an attorney such as you and see what your options are. Correct?
That's correct. And if someone cannot reach legal counsel to exercise their rights to appeal.
Okay. What are the nuts and bolts? How does somebody who believes they may have a shot at getting unemployment benefits, what do they have to do? I think you started to cover it earlier. How do they apply for benefits?
Sure. Well, first, someone can go to the website if they have internet access and they're comfortable with that, laworks.net. There's plenty of information on there. It'll guide you through it. It has questions and answers. Right now, there's even videos. So a person who's able to can do it online. If you're not able to do it online, you can call them and apply by phone. Do you want that number now?
Sure. Why don't we give people that number?
Sure. 866-783-5567.
Why don't you say that one more time? I know people were reaching for pencils and pens and paper.
Sure. It's 866-783-5567.
And that's a Louisiana government agency. That's not a
Right. That's the state agency that runs the unemployment benefits program in Louisiana. It's called the Louisiana Workforce Commission.
Okay. There have been reports of issues with the unemployment filing system. What type of issues? What types of issues are those, and what can a person do if they're having those issues?
Well, the issues can be, there's just a huge variety of things that can go wrong. In a time of high demand, like people have been experiencing lately, they may not be able to get through online or by phone, or only after weeks and weeks of trying. It just depends upon what's going on. If it's not a time of high demand, people can make mistakes. They can make mistakes on their own if they're doing it online. They may not understand the instructions in completing the application. They may make some mistake that holds up their claim. If they're applying by phone, the person who's keying in the data may make a simple mistake that might cause a problem.
Okay. And how does the pandemic and people being laid off due to government shutting down businesses, how does that change the whole analysis? Certainly there's a lot more people who find themselves out of work, but some businesses are getting government money so they can continue to pay their employees. Can you comment on how that changes employment benefits and people's eligibility for benefits?
Sure. Well, all that is looked at by the Workforce Commission when someone applies. So if someone is if they're continuing to be paid, even though they're not working, they shouldn't be applying for unemployment. But if they're not getting paid and they apply, the Louisiana Workforce Commission is looking at the whole situation. They'll see if someone is eligible for regular unemployment or if they're eligible for any type of emergency or disaster-related benefit, depending on the situation, or currently if they're eligible for any pandemic unemployment assistance.
Right. We've heard stories of people who they were only making $400 a week, and they realized if they were unemployed, they could get more than $800 a week, so they quit and applied for unemployment benefits. On those basic, simple facts, and every case is different, that probably wouldn't fly. That probably wouldn't work, correct? Because they voluntarily made themselves unemployed, correct?
I would doubt that the Workforce Commission would give unemployment benefits to anyone who quit, without a COVID-related reason. Okay, so there are multiple reasons related to the pandemic. If someone becomes separated for that reason, they may be eligible even if they were quitting.
Okay.
That applies for regular unemployment as well as the pandemic situation.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time here, but another question we have from our viewers that we got on social media is, will accepting unemployment benefits bring any negative consequences to me? For example, future job opportunities or credit ratings or possible ability to declare bankruptcy?
I'm not aware of any negative consequences in that way. But one thing I would warn people about is that when you apply for unemployment and you get into the system, it carries with it certain reporting and requirements. You have to read everything very carefully. And if the agency makes a mistake and they decide later on that you owe them money back, they might send the notice asking for the money back to an old address. So that's something you have to keep in mind. You may need to keep your address updated with the system because you never know, you might need to use the system again in the future.
Okay. We got time for one more question, apparently, and I don't know if you can answer this briefly, but are non-U.S. citizens entitled to unemployment benefits?
Some are lawful permanent residents, and others who are authorized to work in the United States, legally authorized. I don't want to get too much into the details.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Attorney Rowena Jones, for being here and for all those great insights. For those out there trying to navigate the world of unemployment, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We have to take a brief break, and when we return, we'll have Amanda Golub from your office here to talk to us about evictions and that scary world that people have to navigate. But thank you for being here, and we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. I'm now joined by Ms. Amanda Golub of Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. Ms. Golub is an attorney that specializes in landlord-tenant rights. We're talking about evictions here. She's been on the show in the past, and we're so happy to have her back. Amanda, thanks for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Well, thank you. Great to see you. So before we get to the questions we already prepared, at the time of this filming, we just got word that the governor in the last day or so has changed the Louisiana government's moratorium dates on evictions. Why don't you tell us what the latest is on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Originally, evictions were pushed back till May 18. As of yesterday, the governor's order, this has now been pushed back till June 5th. That could change in the future, but as of the filming of this right now, landlords can't file evictions until at least June 5th. All
right. So we're just less than half a week away from May 18th as of the time of filming. When the show airs, it'll be right around the 18th. But that buys time for people who have not been able to pay the rent. They're landlords who, or maybe they're worried about paying their own mortgages, want to get a tenant in there who will pay them some rent. Now they have a little more time to to not worry about being evicted, maybe make other plans. Let's talk about that question. If you have lost your job, you've been furloughed, your employer says he or she doesn't have money to pay you, can somebody be evicted after June 5th? Can they be evicted on June 6th for not paying their rent?
Well, as of right now, that's when the landlords can start to file, would be after June 5th. They would still have to go to court and still represent that. But tenants who haven't paid their rent and owe rent money at the time they would get to court would most likely be evicted. That's why we recommend, and this is for both sides, for both landlords and tenants, especially right now, especially with what's going on in the world, to try to work together, to set up payment plans, to have that conversation with your tenant. Maybe they're getting unemployment and it didn't come through yet. Maybe they haven't gotten their stimulus money. Maybe since the stay order's been partially lifted and we're in phase 1 right now, people will be going back to work and will be getting income. So these are kind of questions that usually landlords and tenants might not get that personal, but this is an okay time to do that, because if you work together, not only will the landlord get the past rent, but the tenant won't be facing homelessness. So it's a win-win for both people. Because if a landlord, whenever the courts reopen, June 5th, maybe later, they file the eviction, they get the eviction, they still don't have the rent money. So it's in their best interest to try to work with a tenant. Right.
And so you make a really good point. In other words, a lot of people who can't pay their rent right now, there are a lot of people who maybe they got their stimulus money, they heard they don't have to pay their rent, but the advice is, number one, if you have the rent money and you just didn't pay because you heard, hey, free rent, I don't have to pay, you should try and work things out with your landlord, because a moratorium on evictions doesn't mean free rent, it just means delayed rent. So is my understanding correct that just because you don't have to pay the rent doesn't mean it's not stacking up or adding up, that if you don't have to pay the rent for 2 or 3 months, you're not going to eventually have to pay 2 or 3 months rent, maybe all at once with the landlord, if you don't work out some sort of pay plan or get it paid off pretty darn soon?
Yeah, that is correct. It is an eviction moratorium and not a rent moratorium. Unless Congress or the government says otherwise, right now you are responsible for every day that you live in a unit. You are responsible for paying rent for that time. The government and everyone, we're all trying to work together, is trying to, if you're having hard times, if you've had a loss of income, to help folks to be able to get caught up and to give them that extra time, but that's not a free ride.
And the other point you made, which I think makes really good sense, is, you know something, the old honey versus vinegar approach. Be nice to your landlord. Say, look, I know I hadn't paid you, but I have applied for stimulus money. I have applied for unemployment benefits. My lawyer says I should be getting unemployment benefits, or I should be getting some stimulus money. I can pay you half the rent now, but I should be getting more money. If you can work things out with your landlord, and your landlord understands you just don't have the money, or you're getting the money, and they have, you know, even a little bitty heart, maybe they'll work it out with you, so you don't have to incur the expense of getting all your furniture out of the house, putting down a deposit on a new place if you can find one, and going through all that headache and hassle. Because what you do as an attorney representing people in evictions, you can't work miracles. Even if you don't charge fees for those who don't have money to pay a lawyer, you can't avoid people owing what they owe for past due rents, and there's a good chance people may well get evicted even if you do everything that you could possibly do as an attorney, right?
Yeah, and my duty as an attorney is to abide by whatever laws are put in front of us. So that's absolutely what we do. But within that, you know, parties can work together. Another thing is landlords, if they have mortgages, you can call your mortgage company. And a lot of mortgage companies are offering programs. This is for everybody, not just, and I think we'll get to this, certain properties are covered under the CARES Act, which came out recently. But if you have a mortgage, talk to your mortgage company. If you're having trouble paying it, if your tenant is having trouble paying and that's delaying your mortgage payment, most mortgage companies have programs and plans through their COVID-19 crisis lines that will help you out. So if you're able to get help with the mortgage, you can pass that help on to the tenant, and everybody can work together to get caught up.
Right, and you bring up, that's really good. I wanted to get to that too. So if you're the landlord, or you have a property and you have a mortgage that's due, if it's one of these federally backed mortgages, let's say as a landlord, you may not be able to do anything even by June 5th. You may have the opportunity of not having to pay that mortgage on the property, and the creditor that you owe the mortgage to can't do anything about it because of federal regulations, correct?
Yeah, under the CARES Act, which was passed by Congress, they're called covered properties. These are properties with federally backed mortgages, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, if they're through a VA program, if it's through the USDA. And these, under the CARES Act, they have to wait 180 days from when it was passed, which would be July 25th, to even give the tenant a notice to vacate. And under the CARES Act, that notice to vacate has to be 30 days, even though a lot of the notice periods in Louisiana law are less than that. They're usually a minimum of a 5-day, or other common one is a 10-day. But under the CARES Act, these would be 30-day notices, so they couldn't even file until August 24th. And that's for mortgages that are federally backed that are covered under the CARES Act.
Right, and on that note, we have a slide that has, there's a way that even as certainly if you're the landlord and it's your property, you can find out if the loan on your property, the mortgage that you're paying, is federally backed. And we put it up on the screen, but there's a number for the FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, USDA, VA loans. We're going to put this information on the Power of Attorney website. This information, I believe, it may also be available through Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. That's SLLS.org. So even the tenant may be able to find out if that property that you pay rent at as a tenant is one that's federally backed, and if so, they cannot evict you from there if the loan on that property, the mortgage on that property, is backed by a loan through any of those organizations. Correct, Amanda?
Correct, and also there's a foreclosure moratorium on the federally backed properties. So on the landlord side, there's also protections for them.
Okay. Now, someone asked a good question as well. I want to ask you, can the landlord charge you late fees on rent you have not paid due to the moratorium, which allowed the person not to pay rent while during this pandemic?
Under federally backed properties, under the CARES Act, it specifically states that no late fees can be charged during that time. For folks that their landlords don't have a property that's covered under the CARES Act, that is really, at this point, it is up to a judge and to decide that. We would argue that because there is an eviction moratorium and the court deadlines are extended, that would include the late fees, and also just the fact that we are in a health crisis right now, and there's a lot of Louisiana statutes about, when we do have a public health crisis, that we would, say, hey, maybe these aren't due, but that's up to the judges to decide right now, except if it's a federally backed property under the CARES Act, then 100% late fees are not due because it specifically states that in there.
Sounds like a reasonable argument to me. Hopefully the judge would agree. I have another question here. Here's a question someone asked, can I get out of my lease or break my lease during the pandemic, or maybe as a result of the pandemic?
And that would depend on the situation. If there is a health risk, or it depends on, for example, if someone contracted COVID in your building and you have immune system issues, then maybe you could, because that would affect your health. You can't just break your lease because we're in a crisis and you're like, I don't want to live here anymore, I want to move. If you are having problems paying your rent and hey, it's going to be a problem for a while, even if I get the money that the government's helping me out with, talk to your landlord, because you can maybe do a mutual agreement, because your landlord might say, hey, if you don't think you can pay it, let's just call it. Some folks, I know we've talked to a lot of folks that they have a family member that's sick and they want to care for them. Talk to your landlord, see if you can do it, but you can't just decide, hey, the world is having a crisis, I get to move out of my unit without cause. But it really depends on your personal situation. So we would recommend if you are going through that, you can call us and we can take a look at your situation.
Here's another question. It seems to me I've seen some stories in the newspapers myself about this, about foreclosures. So people are asking, are foreclosures happening right now? I've heard stories of people getting eviction notices right now. Are courts allowing people to file eviction notices right now that you're aware of?
No, all the legal deadlines are suspended until June 5th, and that does include foreclosures, unless it's under the CARES Act, which the CARES Act would be the 180 days. So that would be the July 25th date.
Okay. Next question. Is there mortgage assistance available to people affected by the pandemic for assistance with their mortgages?
Some mortgage companies are providing assistance, some are doing forbearances, some are forgiving, some are moving the payments back or doing a payment plan. It really depends on your mortgage company. I don't know right now in Louisiana if there is funding available. I know there is a lot of talk about possible funding, including with Congress. There's a few things in the works, so we are hoping to see that in the future because if you help the landlords, that will also help the tenants.
Okay. We just have a couple more minutes here. Let's see if we can get a couple more questions in. Question. My house needs a lot of repairs right now, but my landlord is scared to hire a contractor because they don't want the house infected. Is that a valid excuse? Is that okay? We really need these repairs.
This is a tricky one, and I hate to keep saying it depends on the situation, but under Louisiana law, if a repair is necessary, so for example, plumbing, electric, your roof is leaking, we just had a bad rainstorm, those are necessary repairs, and if your landlord is refusing to do them, then the option under Louisiana law is you can find someone yourself to do them, and whatever the costs are, you would be able to deduct that from your rent. If you've informed your landlord, hey, I need these repairs done, the landlord says I can't do it for whatever reason, then you say, okay, I'm gonna find somebody, preferably a licensed contractor or plumber, show the landlord, hey, here's the estimate I got. If the landlord still won't fix it, you can make those repairs, pay for them out of pocket, submit that receipt with the rest of your rent money, and that is the process to do it under Louisiana law. Under no circumstances can a tenant say, landlord's not making repairs, I won't pay rent. That will cause you to face eviction.
Okay. And certainly if there's something that may be a threat, like if you think there's a gas leak with your furnace or something that poses a danger, you have every right to get that attended to right away, correct?
Yeah, and that's why the law specifically says necessary repair. So it's not like, my light fixture has a crack in it. That isn't necessary. You might not like the way it looks, but it's not necessary. Necessary is the pipe in my wall burst and it is spilling all over my living room. It is my electric is short circuiting and might cause a fire. A gas leak, that's a good example.
Okay. And briefly, I don't think we covered it at the very beginning. When evictions are allowed to proceed and the courts open up, typically, if the landlord has the right to evict somebody, how long does that process usually take before the landlord can file the notice of eviction or file something in the courthouse and they win before the person actually has to vacate the premises?
Yeah, so generally, and like it depends on the situation, it'd be a 5-day notice to vacate that the landlord has to give, it's a minimum, and then they could file in court. And then usually between when you file in court and when you get a court date, it's about a week to 2 weeks, depending on how many other evictions are filed. And then once you get to court, if you lose, it's a minimum of 24 hours. And it could be more, it depends on what the judge says, but it could be 24 hours after the court date that you would be ordered to leave.
Okay. All right. Well, and
quickly.
Okay. All right, but if there's a most important takeaway from all this, if you're facing the possibility of eviction, would it be fair to say that the most useful piece of advice is try to work things out with your landlord, pay what you can, because you're not going to be forgiven for your rent? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, under the law, you're not going to be, at this time, there's no rent moratorium, so you need to try to pay that rent. And if you can't right now, and I know it's hard for people sometimes to share their personal issues with their landlord, you don't have to go into detail, but just say, hey, I have $400 now. On Friday, I'm expected to get another $300. Can we work something out? It's in everybody's best interest.
Okay. Well, Ms. Amanda Golub, thank you. Thanks Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. Thank you for your very instructive information about landlord and tenant rights and evictions. After this brief pause, we're going to switch gears and talk about financial strategies with certified public accountant Tom South. We'll be right back. We would like to welcome back Mr. Tom South to the show. Mr. South is a CPA with the CPA consulting firm of South and Thomas LLC, which assists businesses and individuals all over. Mr. South previously gave helpful information on this show about what stimulus loans are available and how to apply for same. He's back today to update us on the latest financial information on the same topic and go into more detail for those of you still interested in obtaining loans and to discuss what you need to do after you obtain the stimulus loans in order to meet your obligations and pay back as little as necessary. So he's been assisting businesses and obtaining stimulus loans through this pandemic. So he also was a guest on our previous COVID-19 special. Tom, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, John.
So let's jump right into it. We have a lot of great questions here. One of the first questions is that the IRS is using tax refund data to issue stimulus payments to individuals. What can people do who either didn't file taxes or didn't supply bank account information to do so to ensure that they do receive stimulus money or a stimulus payment?
I think that's a very good question, John. We receive about 10 calls a day in our firm, and the advice we made out a template, and the advice we give the individuals who contact us is go to irs.gov, get my payment, and then put the required information. And the required information is your social security number, your date of birth, a street address, a zip code, your adjusted gross income. It could be 0 for 18 or 19 if you did not file the tax return, but your adjusted gross income for the most recent tax return that you filed, and then the bank account information that you would like the stimulus check to be deposited in. Then update that information on the IRS website, and you will receive your stimulus check by electronic deposit.
All right, and so maybe you didn't file a tax return in 2019 because that was just last year. Maybe you didn't file a tax return in 2018, but if you filed something in 2017, maybe that's good enough, or do you know?
No, they look at 18 and 19, and the IRS.gov Get My Payment updates information with regards to your filing status. You can tell them that there's been 0 adjusted gross income, but you are eligible for the stimulus check of $1,200 per individual. And they will update the file and issue the stimulus check.
Would it help if you hurried up and filed your 2018 taxes, let's say, or if you hadn't filed 18 or 19 taxes, can you maybe go see a CPA such as you, bring your shoebox full of bills and income statements, file 2018 taxes, and even before, right after electronically filing those, then file your stimulus loan application?
Correct. And we're filing a lot of 2018 tax returns for individuals who we call them coming out of the cold. They're filing their 18 and 19 at the same time, and then they're receiving their stimulus check of $1,200 and $500 per dependent.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, I think that's going to help a lot of people, so thank you for that. How can people who haven't received a stimulus payment yet check on the status of their application?
It's still the process is, you know, go to irs.gov, get my payment, and they will tell you specifically if they're working on it, they have no information, or they don't have enough information to proceed. But in the past week, starting on Monday, I do know that checks are now being issued by individuals who do not have a deposit account on file with the Internal Revenue Service. If you remember the last time we spoke, I could not give you a time frame for the checks to come out other than May. But individuals are receiving a paper check presently, which is very good news.
That is good news indeed. What other updates do you have for us that viewers should be aware of regarding the stimulus loan? And I'll tell you well, tell us any big updates you have regarding the stimulus loans.
Well, there are so many updates, and it's happening on a day-to-day basis. And looking at the stimulus packages that are available, you know, we get asked questions on a daily basis. The major one is, how do I get started? And it's an application process. And we advise clients specifically, you know, what do you need? You need capital to cover cost of retaining employees. Then we want to look at the Paycheck Protection Program. That might be right for you. If you need a quick infusion of a smaller amount of cash to cover your needs right now, you might want to look at the economic injury disaster loan. If you have fears about the payments that with your current SBA loan, then you should contact the SBA, and we can help clients do that to get payment relief for a 6-month period. That's helping a great number of people. And just some of the quality-free consulting that's available from our firm and many firms is to navigate this uncharted territory.
Great. And some of these loans, like the payroll protection loans, much of that is forgivable, meaning you don't have to pay much of that money back, provided you jump through certain hoops and you demonstrate that what you use the money for, such as payroll. And there are other loans like economic injury disaster loans, which have, if you are eligible, you get it at a very low interest rate, correct?
Correct. 3.75% amortizable over a 30-year period.
Great.
Which is a good rate.
All right, well, next question. What should I do if I still have not received any government loans this second time around? Are there any other options for me to receive money if I did not get approved for the PPP, or that's personal payroll protection loans, or economic injury disaster loans?
Yes, there are other programs available through banks and through the SBA as an underwriting vehicle for the banks. The one that we use the most is the standard 7A SBA loan. That loan package requires a great deal of financial data and collateral to back up the loan. And there's a limit there of $2 million. But they have several other packages that are available. The 7A small loan amount, the maximum is $350. The underwriting requirements there are not as strenuous as the original 7A loan. Then they have the SBA Express loan, and that's a max of $350,000 that you can borrow. They have a special loan for exporters. They have an exporter working capital loan. They have a Veterans Advantage loan, which a lot of veterans have taken advantage of. And they have a it's called a capital, working capital loan called the CAP loan, which is an umbrella program to help small businesses, you know, meet their short-term working capital needs. And
can you comment on whether or not people who apply for these loans are likely to get approved more than just applying to a bank, you know, before the pandemic ever approved, looking for similar loans for similar needs?
Well, the loan process is through a bank initially. The bank has to initiate the program, and then it's referred to the SBA for further review and approval. And again, the SBA underwrites the bank's loan by up to 80%. So the process is, on all of these loans, the process is more time consuming, where the payroll protection program and the economic injury disaster loans, they've expedited those particular loans to give the businesses money almost immediately. We filed 102 payroll protection loans here, and 98 of them have been funded so far. Economic disaster loans, as you probably know, the original amount was $10,000, and because of the shortage of funds, they've reduced that down to $1,000 per employee with a maximum of $10,000. But the flow of money is happening in the banks. I feel with most of the banks, especially local banks, are doing an outstanding job.
Great. All right. One thing that I'm not sure they've let the public know very clearly is once you get these payroll protection loans, you're not done. You don't get to take the money, use it how you will, and forget about it, and then hope you only have to pay back some of it. You have certain obligations. So the question is, once you've received approval that you get your payroll protection loan, what are your obligations? And the question, when do I have to start tracking the use of the funds, and what documentation should I use and provide the lender to show the money was spent according to the regulations? Could you, in plain English, explain that, explain the basics for people?
The first basic specifically is the time period that's allotted for the payroll protection program. The time period is 8 weeks from the date that the individual taxpayer receives the funds. That's when the accounting clock starts, and we have to account for that. And the criteria for that accounting is you have to use 75% of the payroll protection loan for payroll. And it's as we just discussed, that's the major part of the overall program, and that's to help workers continue to work and stay off of unemployment if at all possible. So some of the other questions that I received, what if I've laid off employees during this 8-week period? Yes, you can lay off employees. If you don't definitely need them, can I hire the same positions? And do I have to hire the same position for the same job of the person I laid off? And the answer to that question is no. You can hire different people to fit the overall headcount need that was on the original application. So it's a process of 8 weeks, and everything has to be documented. The overall funds for payroll, rent, utilities, and interest, those are the three main components. The borrower that qualified for the PPP application, if you were lucky enough, the application would be used, again, 75% of the payroll, the other 25% on rent, utilities, and interest payments. So if you use the funds accordingly, you have no problem as far as documentation standpoint. One of the issues that I just found out this morning, one of my clients received a letter from a large national bank, and it was our understanding until today that the banks were going to handle the forgiveness of the loan. But the letter from the bank specifically outlines that the bank they were only going to supply the initial or the original loan application, collect and verify the information on the loan, and submit it to the SBA.
All right, so that means that the borrower, the money, the taxpayer, who the business that gets the money, they have to handle documenting all of this and providing that to the government to prove that they use the money for payroll and utilities and so forth, as you described, correct?
Correct. Based on the letter, the bank henceforth is only a facilitator. They will gather the documents to prove that you've used the money accordingly, and they're going to forward that to the SBA for the calculation of loan forgiveness. The bank in the letter said they do not have the resources to calculate the loan forgiveness, and they switched that over to the SBA. Okay.
Now, I think you made this pretty clear, but I want to be sure that I've understood it and anyone else who's not clear understands it. The money that comes in, the loan money that comes in, how you spend it after you get the money is what matters. You can't reimburse yourself for the payroll expenses over the prior few months. For example, on what you spent on payroll prior to getting the loan, for example. It's on what you spent that money on payroll after the loan money comes in. Is that correct?
That is correct. The overall program is date sensitive from February 15, 2020. And also it's your payroll that was funded based on the payroll protection loan is what you've been funded as far as the overall loan amount. So the accounting starts at the date based on historical payroll data that you had in place prior to February 15th, 2020.
All right, well, suppose you applied whenever, February 15th, February 25th, but you don't get your loan money until April 25th. Do your payroll expenses prior to the time you got your loan money in your bank account or is it from the time you made the application, or do you know?
I do know the application process is a standalone process. The accounting period for cost begins the day you receive the money for an eight-week period thereafter.
Okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying that. Let's see. We've just got a little bit of time left. What documentation do you need to use to show the lender that the money was spent according to the regulations in order to get that debt forgiveness?
Well, the easiest solution is to reach out to your payroll provider, such as Payroll Office St. Tammany or a qualified payroll processor, to prepare the reports showing that the funds were used for payroll. That should be the simple part. In addition, provide the bills, the canceled checks that cleared the bank for your rent, mortgage, and utilities and interest payments that were used used out of the funds.
Okay. And if you fail to provide the documentation or you fail to use the money adequately on payroll as you're required to, does that mean you have to pay back 100%, or maybe you have to pay back 50% if you fail to use 75% on payroll?
There's a long calculation. You're only going to amortize the unused portion that wasn't used for the specified amount. And the amortization is at 0.98% over a 2-year period. So no, you will not have to pay back 100% of the money. It's a mathematical calculation. We have a spreadsheet we'll be glad to share with anyone to calculate that.
That's great. Well, we're all out of time, so thank you, Tom, for all that great information. We are always grateful to have you on the show. We're going to be right back after a small break.
Great. Thanks, John.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. You can visit johnredmondpoa.com and our social media pages to get more information about today's show, such as handouts and guides produced by Southeast Louisiana Legal Services regarding unemployment and landlord-tenant issues. I hope that we've been able to provide some answers and some clarity through these challenging times. As businesses begin to open, there will be more traffic on the road. Please remember to slow down and drive carefully. Finally, enjoyed this PSA made by Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser's office after the show. It's a good one. I'm John Redmann. Thanks so much for joining us on John Redmann Power of Attorney. Stay safe out there.
This is a message for the heroes working in Louisiana hospitals right now.
To our doctors,
nurses,
the first responders,
The entire medical staff.
For your sacrifice,
your courage,
the long hours,
and commitment to saving lives.
From your fellow Louisianans,
We, the people of Louisiana,
From all of Louisiana.
we just wanted to say
thank you.
thank you.
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
We support you. We love you guys.
And when the day comes when we can return to our normal lives
And go to Jazz Fest and Festival International.
And boil some crawfish together.
And get married.
and Second Line.
And go to the Superdome and hear
First down, say!
Ah, yeah. And we can give back on stage again.
When I can perform for you.
When all of this is a part of our storied past,
We'll show our gratitude in more than just words.
But until then, we just wanted to to say,
We just wanted to say.
We just wanted to say.